1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, this is the nitty-gritty.
Delta-9 THC, which is one of many cannabinoids inside the marijuana plant, when we talk about medicinal use, is the chemical mostly responsible for marijuana's harm. So a good joint from the 70s and 80s had 5 to 10% THC. This new stuff has 45 to 90% THC. So it's really hard to put a number on potency when you have everyone making their own batch. The potency in one batch can be different on one side of the batch to the other. The difference between eating an edible and smoking marijuana is really big because the high when you eat marijuana takes longer to feel. But the problem is if you're not a chronic pot smoker and you take a bite of a brownie and you're used to getting that instant high, all of a sudden you're waiting for this stuff to take effect and you're saying, I don't think this stuff is potent, I'm going to take another bite. And I'm going to take another bite. Before you know it, you're severely hallucinating. So, I know there's a lot of confusion about marijuana. I'm here to tell you the facts. I'm not here to debate policy, but I'm here to tell you the facts about marijuana.
And now even the president has weighed in, telling the New Yorker magazine, I don't think it is more dangerous than alcohol. Here's how he views it. As a bad habit and a vice, not very different from the cigarettes that I smoked as a young person up through a big chunk of my adult life.
You know, I don't get into politics, but that statement just made me so mad. Because, you know, at one of these talks, the parents asked me, well, what is the difference between marijuana and alcohol? The number one difference between marijuana and alcohol is your brain doesn't use alcohol as a neurotransmitter. Your brain uses something that is mimicked by delta-9 THC. So the reason why it's important is that delta-9 THC is acting just like one of the neurotransmitters that your brain has, and it's interfering with it at its core. Delta-9 THC activates a receptor that your brain already has. The receptor that your brain already has is part of the endocannabinoid system. So marijuana binds to the CB1 receptor in that system. This endocannabinoid system is distributed throughout the brain. So I'm going to go through each one of the areas that are affected by delta-9 THC. So let's take a look at the hypothalamus. We jokingly call this one the master gland. So the hypothalamus is involved in at least these four things. We have hormones, appetite, circadian rhythm, and sexual behavior. And the way that these four areas interacts with marijuana is very important. It interacts with hormones just at the time that your body is figuring out what to do with those hormones. And if you don't get your hormones right during adolescence, you lose that magical hormonal window. If this is dysregulated, this is the basis for a number of mood disorders. So now over here in the basal ganglia, what's really important about the basal ganglia, it's your center for movement. This is critical because this is the area where habits are being formed and you're not aware of what's going on there. What's important here is that you know that marijuana is interacting with your habit pathway. And here's your ventral striatum. What's important about the ventral striatum is that it is directing most of the teen's behavior. And the teen brain is still a work in progress. This is where the teen brain is going to wire itself for rewards. So if it is exposed to marijuana at this point, it is highly likely that it's going to cause it to be involved in other addictive behaviors. So the ventral striatum is important because the endocannabinoid system is already setting your brain up to be wired precisely. The minute that Delta 9 THC comes into play, it affects how that precise wiring is done. Part of the reason why marijuana is such a risk factor for the adolescent brain is because of the amygdala. The amygdala, means almond in Greek, is the center of where we have fear, emotion, and anxiety. It is the part of our brain that is in our subconscious, where if you see, let's say, a bear coming at you, this is where you're going to respond with fear. You better run right now. This is the part of the brain that adds emotional salience to everything you do. That is the part of the brain that is driving adolescent behavior. And that is why using marijuana during the teen years is very much like Russian roulette. You don't know what emotional state the kids are in. Okay, so now this is the brainstem. And what's really important about the brainstem is you have the vomiting reflex. And marijuana interferes with the vomiting reflex. And this is why it's really critical if you have marijuana and alcohol at the same time. So if you drink an excessive amount of alcohol, you get intoxicated. And your body's response is to vomit, to remove the toxin from your body. Marijuana, at the beginning stages, not during chronic abuse stage, inhibits vomiting. So guess what happens to the alcohol? It stays in your system and it becomes toxic, very toxic. Now we're over into the cortical areas. Marijuana interferes with higher cortical function, which is something that you really don't want to mess with. It impairs your entire cortex, everything, the part that's supposed to be making you a rational human being. Marijuana also impairs memory formation and learning. The hippocampus, critical for declarative memory formation, learning facts, any new information. If you remove the hippocampus, you can no longer learn anything new. No more declarative memory. Now we're over here in the cerebellum. This is the part of the brain that helps you drive, coordinates your driving. If you have alcohol plus marijuana, it doubles your risk of car accidents. You have no judgment because your cortex is impaired. You have no coordination. Your basal ganglia is involved. How on earth is marijuana ever going to help your driving? The teen brain is very much a work in progress. And what happens during the adolescent years will configure it, and it'll basically make it permanent.